Thank you guys for coming to attending group tonight. We were talking with some, I guess, in group last night. We've been doing this group every Thursday, with a few exceptions, for 21 years now. Every Thursday, and I'll tell you how it came about, why we picked Thursday. Because when I was first starting my recovery journey, I got involved with a Christian Men in Recovery group, and it was on Thursday nights. It was part of my routine. It was so embedded in me that when we developed Justin's Lighthouse and we needed to pick a night for family group, it was kind of a no-brainer. I had to quit going to my or leading my Christian Men in Recovery group, but I made sure they got a really great replacement, and the place that we were doing it is still doing it to this day, and we've been doing this now for 21 years, and it just shows how recovery works. You know, the recovery process. It's about community, and I know that's kind of a buzzword. It's a cliche. What does that really mean? But you know, overcoming life-altering experiences such as addiction, alcoholism, any kind of self-defeating compulsions. Sometimes people just go through really tough times. It doesn't have to have a name. It doesn't have to have a label. And overcoming that usually requires help from others, right? I'm going to say pretty much always, if you want to sustain that. And that's what recovery is about. You know, one group of people getting together who've been where that person has been and helping them grow, and then that person takes the assignment, and then they become another part of a group that's helping other people, and so forth and so on. And you know, they did a movie kind of in that vein a few years ago called Pay It Forward. I never watched the movie, but I understand the concept. But that's what we're all called to do. And so even in your darkest hours, there's something there that is, if you'll respond and you'll fight and you'll push through and you'll accept help and you'll follow and you'll be willing to learn and also be willing to change some things, you're going to discover that God's using that because he's going to use you to help other people in the future. If we didn't have that, that's such an organic thing. That's such a human nature sort of thing. Obviously, it's a spiritual dynamic. Because if that wasn't part of our makeup, we would all go through difficult periods and never come out, right? Because we're not going to claw out on our own. And that's the thing with substance abuse, addicts, alcoholics, and I know because I was one, it takes so long for us to accept help because we think in our rewired addict brain that we're going to figure it out on our own. And it can take years sometimes for someone to finally say, you know what, I can't figure it out. Because you're not going to, right? If we knew how to solve the problem, we would have already solved it. If you're still in this game and you're going on a decade or 2 decades or whatever, 4 decades, and nothing's really changing, you're still living in that cycle of short-term success followed by more disaster, followed by short-term success, followed by more disaster. You can live like that. You can do that. No one's going to stop you. But with recovery, there's a whole other way to live. And we don't have to understand it. We don't have to figure it out. We just have to show up and be teachable. Like anything else. You know, if I want to learn how to play the piano, I find someone who knows how to play the piano, knows how to teach the piano, and we show up and we just do what they tell us to do, right? So it's part of our makeup. We have that ability, but in addiction, the brain has been rewired. So the addict, the patient thinks, oh, no, I'll figure this one out on my own. Even though in every other area of life, we can be very teachable or coachable. That's how messed up the brain is. That's how rewired it is. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about trauma, how trauma hurts the whole family. Trauma is one of the most misunderstood areas of not just therapy, but human life, human existence. Trauma is not about your situation. And I'm going to stress this here in the beginning because so many people believe that trauma, we hear that word trauma and we think, oh no, we think of big disastrous events. We think of like life altering experiences, and that can be the case, but that's not really what's killing us. And I'll explain that here in a minute. What's killing us is the unrecognized trauma that anybody and everybody has. Everybody has a little bit of trauma, and you'll understand that when I get done really describing it. But you have to stop thinking about trauma as a situation that happened, right? Because in the beginning of a change process, a healing process, which is why a lot of people never really heal. They just live their life bitter and resentful, and it's not me, and they're just waiting for the world to change and everybody else around them. But then when they're posed with this idea, well, maybe you've got some healing to do. No, I don't have any trauma. And we look back into our life, and we look for situations in our past. And we go, nope, had a great childhood, awesome parents, got to play sports, played an instrument, high school was awesome, then this happened, and then this happened, and everything's great. There's nothing to see. That's not what's required for a trauma impact. Trauma isn't about what we're actually experiencing. Trauma impacts occur when we perceive what we're experiencing in a painful, hurtful, distorted way. So it becomes an emotional response that we don't know how to process, we don't know how to talk about, and I'm going to give a lot of examples. The one that always comes to mind, I know you guys get tired of hearing this, the people in the group, because I say this all the time. It's just one of my easy ones. You know, I grew up a middle child with two brothers, older and younger, raised by a single mom who was superwoman and master problem solver, and also our master enabler, and all these things. And all it takes to have a traumatic experience is seeing your brother get a really cool birthday present. Now, even though you got a really cool birthday present 9 months ago, it doesn't matter. He got a really cool birthday present, and you think it's cooler than yours, and now your feelings are hurt. Right? So, because when you're 8, you don't know how to be happy for other people. You're very self-centered, and you're operating on feelings. But what that experience begins to set in our brain, and then we have a little storage cabinet up there that remembers these experiences. Maybe not in detail, but we remember that we had an experience that made us feel like I wasn't good enough. My mom loves him more, which means maybe I'm not lovable. And all of these things start going on in the brain between 8 and 12, 8 and 14, and that's where it gets solidified. It doesn't mean that we had horrible experiences. It means we perceived a basic threat to our emotional needs. It doesn't have to be true. In fact, I think most times it's not true when we're talking about these emotional hurts. There's a great, Gabor Mate. He's very well known now around in trauma circles. He's written some books, I think, and he does a podcast. He was a very well known physician, I think, in New York. But his story, he tells a great story. Well, let me tell you what he said. And this isn't a quote. Don't quote me on this. But basically, what he's describing also is what trauma is. It's not about what's happened. It's about what we think has happened. Now, just sit in that for a minute. So when we're having whatever kind of experience, you could be sitting at the movies and the popcorn's not coming fast enough. And you start getting frustrated and you start getting irritable, and now you're going to start chewing people out. Well, that's not a normal response to slow popcorn. So what is it? Well, it's a response to an association of some hurtful experience in the past. But if we don't know how to recognize it, and we don't know how to process it, and we don't really understand what's going on, we just go through life being mean, being easily hurt, being quick on the anger trigger. We become hyper vigilant to anything that might pose a threat in our environment. That's not healthy living, and then we can't figure out why we always feel anxious. Chronic anxiety is the result of unresolved emotional pain. It really is that simple. Only, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but only about 7% of the population, if even that, have an organic clinical breakdown in the brain that causes them anxiety for no apparent reason. That means 93 to 95% of the time, when we're feeling anxious, it's an emotional issue we've never dealt with. So you want to get rid of, if you want to learn how to heal anxiety, well, you don't heal your anxiety, but if you want to learn how to live without anxiety and have some different coping mechanisms so that your anxiety doesn't just stop you in your tracks, you're talking about emotional pain you've never touched on. That's the answer. That is the solution. That's what recovery is all about. So I think I was going to go back to something. I already lost my train of thought. But keep that in mind as we go through this. It's not about what's happened. It's about what we think happened. What we always say is it's not about reality. It's about our perception of reality, right? And I gave that example. It's just having an experience that you interpreted as, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I don't belong, I don't feel safe, I don't feel secure, I don't feel respected, whatever that is. And remember, this gets solidified in our minds between the ages of 8 and 12-ish. Well, an 8-year-old child doesn't know how to process that. We don't even know how to communicate that. So you may have an experience where you feel butthurt and you're pouting and you're withdrawing, and mom or dad says, honey, are you okay? Is everything fine? We're just celebrating, and what's wrong? Well, a child doesn't know how to express that. So he just goes deeper, or she goes deeper into self. And then the parents are like, well, I don't know. And so, well, let's just get him some ice cream. Let's try to cheer him up. And so it gets dealt with, and that's a key right there. Our parents can, or anybody in our family can unwittingly reinforce what comes next. And so remember, in the developing addict brain, the message is whenever I feel hurt, whenever I feel less than, whenever I feel offended, whenever I feel emotionally unsafe, if I can dramatize that, I'll get a reward. I get validated, I get approval, I get ice cream, I get my car payment made, I get off the hook. I don't have to change. I don't have to follow responsibilities. And we did a really good group, I think 2 Thursdays ago. You want to watch that because we really got deep into those personality traits. So check on that. Okay, I promised everybody that I wasn't going to make this super long because trauma it's really not a complex topic, but it can take a little bit of runway to work through it all, because I want you to understand it. And I know that in the beginning, if you're first learning about trauma effects and trauma impacts, you have probably believed your whole life that you don't have any trauma. The whole PTSD thing came about after the Vietnam War. I think after World War II, they referred to the returning war vets as shell-shocked. After Vietnam, a little bit more research had been done. We were able to label it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But the reality is we can all have it. That's what hypervigilance is. Hypervigilance, feeling anxious for no apparent reason. Right? You're having a PTSD experience. Something in your environment is reminding your subconscious memory storage bank that you're having the same experience that you had 10 years ago or 15 years ago. That's why we can overreact to things. For example, my wife says, hey, did you unload the dishwasher? And I scream back across the house, gosh dang it, I'm going to load the dishwasher. Quit asking me, or unload, whatever. Quit asking me about the trash. I told you I would do it. Well, that's not a normal response. A normal response to did you unload the dishwasher is yes or no. But we can really overreact in these kind of experiences. What is that? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's unresolved pain. And when you start digging into those things, which you discover, and I'm just using this one as an example, you have to do your own exploration. You discover that when you were between the ages of 8 and 12, 8 and 14, you had probably multiple experiences where you were being irresponsible, and your parent would, give you some chores and you wouldn't do it, and every time you did do it, the intensity got a little bit louder, but every time you didn't do it and you got chewed out, you felt less than, right? So now as an adult, when someone asks us a very simple adult type question, did you get the car washed today? And if you didn't do it, you're feeling shameful. And how do we respond to feeling less than, shameful? The opposite extreme. Shameless. Get off my back. Quit asking me. I told you I would do it. And especially in addiction, this really gets ramped up. In self-defeating compulsive behaviors rewire the brain. Trauma rewires the brain. These impacts that we're talking about rewire the brain. And so we can grossly overact and treat the people closest to us that we say we love the worst. That doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's unresolved pain. And so we, as say a trauma patient, we go through life hypervigilant, always looking, hey, we're going to go and have dinner with some of the friends, our friend group this weekend. And this is what an example of hypervigilance. Really, well, who's going to be there? Well, who cares what's going to be there? You're being invited. It's an opportunity to belong and mingle and fellowship and enjoy yourself. But our first question is, well, who's going to be there? How long is it going to take? Where are we going to go? What we're doing is we're looking for threats in that environment. Oh, Bob's going to be there? Oh, okay. No. Me and Bob, we don't really click. I don't care for Bob. That's PTSD. That's all it takes. If that's okay with you, you can continue in that, but just recognize how it affects all areas of your entire life. All areas. It affects our relationships. It affects the relationship that we have with ourselves. Absolutely affects our relationship we have with God. It affects our own growth opportunities, because we're waiting for everybody else to change. If you would just do something different, then I wouldn't have to feel bad. If you hadn't done that thing, if you didn't ask me that question, if you would get off my back, if people, places, and things and situations would just do something different, then I would be okay. Let's go to this is the actual first slide. Okay, some of these I already kind of blew through without showing you the slide. This one is the 3 basic fears. This is where you want to identify, and this is also your tool for healing. This is where you want to start getting to know you. We could come up with, I've got some on here, screenshot this and study it later. These are literally the 3 basic fears that all humans have. Incidentally, it's also the only 3 things we ever get angry about. And remember this, anger is not an emotion. Mad is an emotion. Anger is a condition. Anger is what we use to cover up other emotions. You're not really angry, you're just trying to regain control, right? Let's go back to the dishwasher example. My wife asks if I unloaded the dishwasher. Well, if I had, I'd just say yes, and I'd feel good about myself. But if I hadn't, I don't want to say no because I feel bad about myself because I didn't do it, even though it's not that big a deal. I could do it right now. I could do it in 5 minutes. I could communicate. I'll do it in an hour, whatever. But that's not what's happening. And so we bark back when we feel less than. That's us feeling like we're not in control. We're losing a sense of control. And the fastest way to regain a sense of control is with anger. Quit asking me that. I already told you I would do it. Right? And we just regained a sense of control. Yeah, see, I'm good. Well, we're also damaging our relationship. And the first relationship we damaged was the one we have with ourself. where we have to learn how to live for self, doing the next right thing regardless of how we feel, because those are the things that make us who we are. Operating on our own principles, on our own rules, on our own values. Okay, so, and I could do a whole other topic. In fact, we do a whole other topic on that, and that's why it's easy for me to kind of get off track a little bit. But let's bring this back to the 3 basic fears. Okay, really think about this. The first basic fear is not getting something that we want. Now, it can be material, but that's not really what hurts us. What hurts us is when we believe we're perceiving that we're not getting love or attention or approval or affection or a reward or honesty or stability or safety, security, belonging, respect. It's important for you to identify. I always suggest just pick 5 of your basic needs, the ones that you recognize are really important to you. It's really important for me to be loved. Okay, that's a good one. It's really important for me to receive admiration when I've done something, especially in our close relationships. That's a normal process. We need to offer admiration and respect to each other, love to each other. So when someone asks me if I've done something I haven't done, I'm really operating in fear. Fear of not getting something that I want or need. I need to add that, or need. So what's missing in that dynamic? Well, now I feel like I'm not being loved, right? I feel like I'm not being approved of. I'm losing my stability. I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel secure. I don't feel like I belong. And the only way I can regain those things is to take them back. Anger, which that's a distortion, obviously, because you're not really taking it back. You're just regaining a feeling of having it back. Get off my back. Quit asking me that. When all we had to do was just communicate. Because the reality is that was never lost. Love was never lost. Belonging was never lost. Affection, honesty, stability, safety, security, belonging, those things were never lost. But here we are in our distortion, in our PTSD, operating in that very way. The second basic fear is losing something we thought we had. Okay, and that might even be more apropos to the dishwasher example. Number 2, the things that we're afraid of losing are the same types of things. Feeling loved, but now feeling like I'm losing love. Feeling approved of or good enough, validated, but now for a situation occurs, and now I'm afraid that I'm losing that validation. So I've got to regain that validation. That's a lie. It's not ours to regain. It's not. We can't operate in our fears. It was never lost in the first place. So you can see how relationships with the world, ourselves, our close relationships, or romantic relationships, whatever it is, can turn to conflict and weirdness really fast. And it leaves other people around us wondering, what the heck? Geez, I just asked you if you took out the trash. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is to me, because I got undealt with trauma, I didn't hear, did you take out the trash? What I heard is, are you good enough? Are you acting? Are you performing good enough? Are you worthy today? Can I approve of you today? That's the fear. The third fear is getting caught for something that we did. And another way to think of this is being caught for being human. Okay, so I made a mistake. Oh man, I forgot to load the dishwasher, or I forgot to unload the dishwasher. I can't even keep up with my own analogies. I forgot to do that thing. Right? Well, that would be a very normal, healthy response. Oh gosh, I forgot. Thanks for reminding me. I'll do that now, or I will do that in an hour, or whatever it is. When we're operating out of fear because of undealt with pain, emotional pain, that's not how we respond. We push back. We deny. We try to make it their fault. The only reason I feel this way is because of you. I was gonna take out the trash, but you didn't tell me where the trash bags were. I was gonna take out the trash, but you already took the big cans to the curb. Right? You guys, what I'm describing are, for some of you, daily experiences with your loved one who is the patient, we'll say, the one who's really, really struggling. Or you certainly recognize it up to this point, depending on how long you've been in recovery. But the overwhelming fear, what it says on number 3, on the bottom of number 3, if you can't read it, is being caught for bad behavior, regret, being found out, our humanness is showing. Think about that. Because in overcoming unresolved emotional pain we don't even recognize we have, the way we counter shamefulness, not being good enough, is we want everybody to think we're actually better than. We try to perform more than human. So when our humanness is discovered, like, oh gosh, I made a mistake, we won't admit that. We just blame. That's the sickness, and that's what we're trying to heal in trauma. We have to heal it, or we can't change. Okay. This one, understanding this. This isn't. This is just a quick slide. It's nothing fancy. This isn't one of our ebooks, but it is really good information. And if you guys want a copy of this, I'll be happy to send it to you. Just reach out to Tina, and we'll just send you our PDF. But it's been a while since I've been through it. We usually do this one on the board, so it's a little bit kind of a different style for me. Let me see if there's anything worth talking about here. Yeah, this one's important because most people, as I've already mentioned, most people don't understand how trauma affects them. Most people don't even recognize that they have trauma to deal with, because we've just developed all of these other defensive behaviors to cope with life. We don't see it as trauma because, remember, we're thinking trauma has to do with something happening in our situation. It has everything and only thing to do with how we're perceiving our experience from our perspective, from how am I feeling? If I feel unloved, then I must be unlovable, even though everyone in here is loved, unconditionally loved by God, by your family members. If that's not enough, is that not enough? That should be enough for all of us. And of course it is. But trauma keeps us in a place where we think we're earning it. And then that really can get distorted. We can start associating love with rewards. So if my mom is doing everything I want her to do for me, I feel like she's loving me. So when she says, no, honey, I can't do that, I feel like she's not loving me. That's why we throw temper tantrums, even as adults. That's why we push back. We chew people out. We can get very bitter. We can get very ugly. But what's really happening is my humanness is showing, and I need to get that thing so that I can feel better. Right? This is not a life that's built on personal values or personal goals or even a strong sense of identity. It's the opposite. It's a complete lack of identity. That's how dangerous this unresolved pain is and how long it's been a part of our life. Okay, this one says a tendency to minimize the full effects of trauma, right? Because we don't want to appear weak. We want to act like we have it all together. That's that shameless dynamic that I was just talking about. When push comes to shove, we want to be able to think in our mind, in the patient mind, that it's everybody else, right? Well, the only reason I'm in this situation is because you asked me that question, or you refused to do that thing. I had no choice but to leave the ICU unit because you wouldn't make my car payment, so I had to go back to work, which we don't actually go back to work, right? It's all excuses. But it's It's an ongoing belief within self that I have to have it all together. I have to have it all together, and I need everyone else to think I have it all together. That's why we manipulate. That's why we lie. We're lying to ourselves. We don't get it. We've been stuck in survival mode for so long that in the beginning of a change process and recovery process, the patient does not recognize any of this stuff. And it's so predictable. It's so crazy. Even though, I know, families can have different circumstances. You can have kind of little different experiences, but what's going on in the behavior and the emotions and the thought processes is the same for not just all addicts. Anybody who lives dysfunctionally, they all have some sort of compulsion, and it might be, homelessness can be a compulsion, fishing can be a compulsion, TikTok scrolling can be a compulsion, gambling, pornography, drinking, using, anything that becomes kind of the go-to relief behavior for that person. If you're not going to give me what I want, or I can't have what I want, I'm just going to go and follow my compulsion because there I feel safe. That's all driven by unresolved emotional pain. The trauma is different for everybody, right? So two people can have the same experience. Let's take siblings. Siblings grow up in the same household environment for the most part. Same rules, same principles, same values, same very similar experiences. And yet one sibling, because of their ability to perceive reality at a young age, just kind of goes through life and life is productive and they never really get off kilter. But then another sibling is always struggling and perhaps always has struggled. And yet they've pretty much been through the same experience. It's not about the experience. It's about how we perceive that experience. And this is important. I really stress this for families because it's not your fault. Addiction, this dysfunctional behavior is not the fault of the family. But I know that's easy as a family member. It's easy to take that on because and that's traumatic too, by the way. Because what happens when we have a crisis situation, or multiple ones, right, for a decade, whatever, the brain needs to make sense of what's happening. And one of the ways that we do that, I think one of the simplest ways that we tend to do that as humans is we just take the blame. We try to blame, but in the end, we just take the blame. We just say, you know what, we screwed up our kid. It's our fault. I knew I should have not pulled him out of football. I knew we should have let him play the piano. I knew we should have let him, have more sleepovers. I knew it. I knew we were messing him up back then. Or I wish we hadn't argued so much in front of our kids. Or we wish and you'll just get stuck in that loop of trying to figure out the cause, you're being the cause. It's not helpful. It's not true. Do family members do things that they regret? Yeah, we all do. But you haven't caused this pain. It's a perception. Now, but that's not true. One time I wasn't watching them when they were on the playground and they fell and they broke their leg and they haven't been able to walk right ever since. Okay, well, that's a legitimate experience and it's probably not traumatizing. It was then, but that isn't necessarily someone keeps with them other than a really good story, unless they were like some world-class athlete about to go to the Olympics and that broken leg completely destroyed their whole Olympic career. It's probably not a traumatizing experience. Why? Because the brain can make sense of it, right? We can understand it. I was on the thing and then I fell and then this thing happened and then my leg got caught and it snapped, and which gives me the willies. Anyway, I'm a tennis player. I don't like rough sports. Okay, so let's go on to complex. There's simple trauma and there's complex trauma. What difference does it make? It's unresolved pain is what I want you to stay focused on. Complex trauma is just over and over and over, or ongoing experiences or multiple experiences. All addicts, alcoholics, all dysfunctional, compulsive, self-defeating behaviors are driven by ongoing unresolved pain, ongoing perception. Every time they're having an experience, think about this, and everyone in this room, and I hope everybody watching our live stream, when it came to finally drawing that final line in the sand for your family member, and everyone got together and said, we're not willing to accept this anymore. We're not willing to accept that anymore. We're expecting you to start doing something different. And all the responsibility got put back on the patient, and everyone else who'd been kind of keeping the process going stepped up and said, here's my line. We love you, but we're not going to help you die anymore. Think about what happened next. What happened next is, and I don't necessarily mean behaviorally, I mean thought process wise, emotionally. You may have seen anger, you may have seen pushback, you may have seen silence, the silent treatment, you may have seen, so you might have even heard, so you're telling me you don't love me? Right? That is exactly how the patient would perceive an encounter like that. Everyone holding them accountable reminds them of the lie that they are not good enough. That's a person who has learned to associate love with things. So when they hear, we're not going to enable you anymore, what they're hearing is we're not loving you anymore. Even though it's the opposite that's happening, that's what love looks like. Love is we're not going to help you die, but we will absolutely help you live. But the patient doesn't see that. That's their trauma. That's the patient's trauma. That's their perspective. Remember, when an 8-year-old child, a 10-year-old child, a 15-year-old child has an experience that leaves them feeling less than, they don't know how to process that. They don't know how to even communicate that. So they draw a conclusion. It must mean I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and it must be because I'm not good enough. So they set about trying to prove to the world that they are better than. And this is why you do see, we talked about this last week, you see in dysfunctional people, you see a history of a lot of achievement. But and which is confusing for the families, because the families will say, wow, God, they used to be the best at, and the best in the 400 meter. They used to be the first chair in band. He can't even read sheet music, but he plays by ear. And you recognize all these amazing talents within that person. But that's not enough. They're still waiting, needing, yearning to feel good enough. And because it's all distorted and the patient looks outward instead of inward, it never gets resolved. It just increases. Well, recovery, this therapeutic process of change that we're all in, is designed to move the person inward, to go to the one place they've never been yet, inside, not outside. Hey, if you'll keep doing that thing, and you'll keep doing that thing, and if you'll keep doing that thing, then I don't have to change. But when you stop doing that thing, and you stop doing that thing, and you stop doing that thing, I have no choice but to change. But before I accept that I need to change, I'm going to put up a pretty good fight. Right? I'm going to push back. I'm going to call you names. I might even sneak by your house and block your car in so you can't go to work. I'm gonna make you feel uncomfortable. When all of that is a person who doesn't feel good enough. They're believing the lie. So don't think for a minute that this dysfunctional cycle isn't a spiritual matter. It is absolutely a spiritual matter, a supernatural issue, and we need to be focused on the right side of that spiritual issue in recovery. The most common methods for dealing with trauma. This is how we've all dealt with it. We deny it. I kind of touched on this in the beginning. We say, oh, no, 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 nothing to see here. I've looked at my situations and I've never seen my best friend get run over by a bus. I've never broken a bone. Heck, my parents aren't even divorced. I've never had any traumatic experiences. Well, remember what I just described, basically the measuring stick of whether or not we have trauma isn't the right one. So when you understand what trauma really is, we have to reconsider everything. The second way, most common method for dealing with trauma is we just lie or we cover it up. That's what we're doing when we're blaming ourselves. That's what families are doing when they're blaming themselves. We're denying it. We're covering it up. No, no, no. It's fine. We just don't understand. They've never had any trauma. There's nothing to deal with. We were great parents, and it must have been that friend. They had that one friend, and then they've never been the same since. Right? We're trying to find reasons why, but we're looking in all the wrong directions. And ultimately, we just stay stuck in bitterness and fear and resentment. Unresolved pain in one person, and of course I'm arguing that everybody in the family has a little bit of unresolved pain, but unresolved pain in the identified patient, in the person in the family that everyone's really trying to help, can turn the entire family upside down. That's the danger of all of this. And of course I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Okay. Here's some symptoms of trauma. So if you're still not sure, if you experience extreme emotions, highs and lows, oh man, yesterday was such an awesome day, and today I just feel down. I don't know why, for no apparent reason. Feeling that someone else's issue is your fault. Replaying our painful experiences over and over, or replaying anger over and over. Now think about that one for a minute, because we can all have an experience like that. Maybe last week you tried to return something at the store. Excuse me, just a second. And they gave you a hard time. You didn't have the receipt. And anyway, it escalates to this really big explosion, and you got to get the manager, and they're threatening to call the police, and you're just beside yourself because all you want to do is return it, and it's turning into a 4-hour ordeal, and you're getting a little ramped up. And then finally, whatever happens, you get the return or you don't, but it's gone, and you've left the store, and now it's a week later, and you're still replaying it in your mind. That's a traumatic experience by definition. But look at that. What was actually happening? Well, because it didn't go smoothly, it probably reminded you of something, made you feel like you weren't good enough, made you feel like you didn't belong, made you feel less than. Well, we can have an experience today that triggers a similar emotional response from something that happened 20 years ago, and you're not even conscious of it, right? This is all stored in our subconscious, so you don't have to recall it. Oh, no, it's not that. That was so long ago. It doesn't matter. Unless you've processed it and have allowed it to heal and leave you, let go of it emotionally, not just mentally, it's still there. That's how it works. So every time you have a hurtful experience that you've perceived as a hurtful experience, and the way you respond to it gets stored in your memory. And it's there. And it is stuck in that little subconscious file cabinet. Remember the overreacting. That's what's happening in that. So these are all symptoms that come up often. That means you've got some work to do. You've got some of your own emotional things to work on. And you want to stick around, because that's what this Thursday night is about. You might even see images long after the event happened. We can have what I like to call drama trauma, a dramatic trauma. things that legitimate. You got someone walked across the room and punched you in the head. A coworker smacked into your car and it blocked you in, and now your left arm is never going to be the same. Or, we can have actual hurtful experiences that really did happen the way we're perceiving it. It doesn't require that, but we will see images, can see images long after the event. You may have one right now. Just slow down a little bit, let your mind slow down, and do some exploring on that. Something when you least expect it. You're having a good day, you're working in the yard or whatever, something you enjoy, and then just out of the blue, boom, you get this memory. And it can be so vivid, you remember the exact words that were said. You remember the color of the car. You remember what you were wearing that day. That's unresolved pain. Think we're going crazy. We can think we're going crazy. Chronic anxiety can be a huge part of this. So if you've got chronic anxiety, and I think a lot of us can have chronic anxiety and not even realize it, we've just adapted to it, right? You think it's your normal, but it's not normal. Gee, I don't know why my blood pressure is so high. I feel fine. Well, you're adapting to it. There's an old expression. In fact, it might even be my old expression. I don't know where this came from, but I've been saying it for a long time. A person doesn't really understand how much pain they've been in until they're no longer in pain. And that's really powerful. I recognize that in my own journey, that because I do all these things too, or did all these things, and can do them again if I'm not focused on my recovery. Because we're built to adapt, we're built to cope, we're built to overcome, and so we have these natural abilities to do just that. So what we want to do in recovery is we want to learn how to not stuff them and then power our way over them. We want to learn how to identify them so we can process them and move through them. That way we don't carry them with us. But up to this point, for many of us, we've just got a whole stack. There's a whole warehouse filled with pallet after pallet after pallet of unresolved painful experiences, really painful perceptions. The second one, stop enjoying life. Have you stopped enjoying life? And you got to be honest with yourself when you ask yourself that question. Do I enjoy it as much as I used to? What's different? Do I find myself focusing so much on another person that I have kind of let up on some of my own enjoyable things? I don't do that stuff anymore. I don't do that one thing anymore. You got to look at that. Feeling like you've done something wrong. When that's classic. We can all feel like we've done something wrong. We want to take ownership of the disposition of our loved one. Okay, but that also goes for the patient. Patient lives a life of being afraid of being caught for doing something wrong, right? Because their core perspective is or begins with, I'm not good enough. So they become hypervigilant in their environment, looking for things that will help them to feel good enough. And that's why we seek validation. That's why we exert so much instant gratification, or a need for instant gratification. We want what we want when we want it. I need this now, and as long as I'm getting that and I've got people that will satisfy that, then I can feel good about myself. But the whole dynamic is very distorted. Feeling unsafe even though you are safe. That's a classic one. A lot of people with old, unresolved emotional pain have this as a symptom. Feeling unsafe in your environment, and it's not about the environment, it's about what's going on inside. feeling unsafe even though we are safe. You look around and I'm surrounded by people who love me, and I've got a roof over my head, and whatever, there's a locked door, or I'm at work and these people, I know them and they're good people, and yet we can just feel this internal angst. Having trouble sleeping and concentrating is also a big one. Are you having trouble sleeping and concentrating? Now, that's not a sure thing. Maybe you got some other things going on, but it's amazing when we start identifying our unresolved emotional pain and touching it, allowing ourselves to heal it. So much of these other things that have become a part of our life, maybe for years, decades, tend to subside, right? They get less and less and less, and all of a sudden you're sleeping so much better, but you don't realize why. This need to escape reality, well, that's what substance abuse is. That's what just compulsive behavior is. That's what impulsive behavior is. That's what rescuing behavior is. When we're trying to save somebody else, that's an escape of our own reality. Well, if I can just solve their problem, then I won't feel bad. And I can kind of get into that, but I'll keep it going. We can shut down emotionally. Both of us, family members, patient, we just shut down emotionally. Remember those fears. If I'm afraid that you're not loving me, I'm afraid of not getting something that I want, I'm afraid that I might lose something that I thought I had, and you're not reading my mind, you're not doing all of those usual things that you usually do that make me feel better, you're not rescuing me, the patient doesn't know how to process that. So what do? We shut down. We isolate. We disappear. We can all do that just in our head, I think. You can still be present, but be isolating. Feeling that, okay, I should have put this at the beginning. This line here, I'm going to read the whole thing because it's so important. This is what blocks healing. Feeling that talking about what's really happening would be a betrayal to that person with the secrets causing the pain. And so we can just keep the cover up going for years. Another way to think of that is, all families have an issue, some particular issue. Maybe, Uncle Bob is an alcoholic, but we're all just pretend like he's not. What is it? The white elephant in the room? Is it the white elephant in the room? Is that the saying? But we want to just kind of move around that. Well, we do that in addiction too. We can do it for years in addiction. It's okay. But remember that dysfunctional family dynamic? And we haven't done that in a while at Family Group, but we probably need to do it soon. When addiction in particular enters the household, enters the family dynamic, and it doesn't have to be under the same roof, everybody starts adapting to different roles to make up for the role that the patient isn't supplying. Right? So now everybody's doing a little bit of extra chores. Everybody's doing extra cooking. We're having conversations with the outside world, but we're having those conversations in a way that's protecting the sanctity of the family. Well, it's not their business that Bobby's not doing so good, and so but what happens is it puts us in this cover-up mode to where we're not really living in reality. We don't know how to process that. Families aren't taught any of this stuff. Nobody's taught any of this stuff. We have to learn it. And hopefully, the key is to get in a right recovery system and then be as teachable as you can possibly be, because the solutions aren't what we think they are. How we really bring about change isn't what, as family members, we've been thinking it would. Well, because as family members, we thought, well, man, if I just set them up in a house and get them a brand new car and get them a job at Uncle Bob's shop, and we'll set them up, and then everything will be wonderful. It doesn't solve the problem, and you already know that, right? If you're part of this group, you already know that. You guys have already been down that road. PTSD. Here, I love this. and I have to take credit for this. I came up with this. Well, I got my wife off camera, and anyway, it's an inside joke. She's laughing at me. Okay, so think about PTSD. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. But what is that really? What does that mean? It means after pain, anxiety, reaction. After pain, anxiety, reaction. After my pain, I basically have an anxiety reaction. And so the way we heal is we learn how to identify the pain and respond to it. We don't have to deny it. We don't have to make it go away. We don't have to pretend it doesn't exist. We don't have to cover it up. We don't have to minimize it. Well, yeah, it's a little bit that way, but it was so long ago it doesn't bother me anymore. I just can't figure out why I can't quit drinking. Right? That's a line we use a lot. There's nothing to see. I don't have any trauma. I just want to not drink today. It won't work. Because the reality is we got tons of trauma that we got to heal. The drinking part, that's what came later. Remember, it's pain that comes first. And now we're just repeating it, not even recognizing what we're doing. Okay, so that's just a description of what PTSD is, but that's all it is. It's you're having a similar experience that's already occurred in your life, in your thinking, in your feelings, and you're re-experiencing it. Honey, did you unload the dishwasher? Boom, takes me right back to when I was 8 years old or 10 years old, and I wasn't very responsible, and my mom was always yelling at me to unload the dishwasher. You see how I use the word yelling? See, she wasn't yelling, she was asking. But my mind hears yelling. Quit yelling at me. So when my wife does it, when I'm 50, and I haven't done it, it reminds me of that 10-year-old irresponsible little boy who felt like he was getting in trouble. You're re-experiencing the emotional aspect of an old experience, of an old trauma impact. Even though none of what I'm thinking is happening. Nobody stopped loving me. Nobody is pushing me out of the belonging group. Nobody's disrespecting me. Nobody's invalidating me. None of that is happening. But that's how we'll perceive it, and that's where we get stuck. Long-term effects can feel traumatized for years and years and years until healing occurs. Yeah, pretty much already said that. But this is worth reading. God can release us from it. However, I believe God uses your healing journey to help others. And that's what I opened up with. If you tuned in late, I started with that. If you're going through a really difficult time right now and things seem dark, and I know, when we're going through a difficult time, we do become very self-focused, right? Our focus is on how we feel, what we're having to deal with, what's not working out for us, perhaps what other people we wish were doing, but they're not. You can't see it now, but even in your darkest places, if you'll respond, God is going to use that. And then it's going to be your responsibility in the future to help other people going through a very similar thing. That's what recovery is about, right? We're paying it forward. But you got to be teachable. You got to be willing. You got to be in the journey to be able to say, man, this sucks. And I don't know how to get out of it, but I'm willing to learn how. And then all of a sudden, people appear. And we follow them. And then the things that you've been through will be used to shape you, to strengthen you. I know that kind of sounds corny, but that's exactly what happens. That's why we're here. That's the coolest thing about recovery. Common ways of dealing with PTSD. Another way to think of this is if you can identify or you recognize any of these three things as something that you say or you think a lot, you got some work to do. I just need to stop thinking about it. I just need to forget about it. It's no big deal. I just need to get over it. I just need to let it go. Let what go? Get over what? What exactly are you talking about? Well, what we think we're talking about when we're thinking those things or we're saying those things is a situation. That thing happened, and I just need to get over it. And that's why you're not getting over it, right? Because it comes back, and then months go by, and then it comes back again. And you're like, oh man, you know what I was just thinking about today? I was thinking about that Bob character, and do you remember that time, that thing? And then start looking at your interpretation of the thing. Start looking at the way you are thinking about yourself in that thing. How did it make you feel? Oh, I was mad. No. Keep going. Well, when this thing happened, it reminded me that I wasn't good enough. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough. It made me feel like I didn't belong. It made me feel unsafe. It made me feel, what did that remind you of? Well, it reminded me of when I was a kid and this thing would happen, or they would pick teams at lunchtime for kickball and I would never get picked. Right? That's how you heal. You don't, there's a misnomer. Let me see. I think I have it. Maybe not. There's a misnomer. We think we got to go into the therapist office and we got to sit across the desk and we got to just regurgitate a bunch of stuff. That's not how we heal. Those process sessions or those venting sessions can be helpful, but that's not how people heal. People heal when you identify reality, when you touch it, when you talk about it, you share it. Without fear. I mean, you may have fear in the beginning, but you got to push through that. So think about this. Because trauma is stored in the memory, it's there. It can be triggered by smell, sight, sound, touch, feeling that subconsciously you associate with a previous event, like I was just talking about, or previous perception. And your body and your mind will do whatever it can to numb or avoid reliving the painfully stored memory. Now remember, this is going on underneath the surface. So when you're having those experiences, you're not thinking, oh my gosh, this reminds me of oh gosh, I'm old. This reminds me of 2013 when that thing happened. But what you are experiencing are those symptoms we talked about earlier. You're feeling high anxiety. You're feeling upset. You're feeling hurt. You're feeling impulsive. You're feeling compulsive. That's your clue. That's your check engine light. When you're having those experiences for no apparent reason, something's triggered that. You could walk through a department store and go past the perfume counter or the cologne counter and just boom, recall a memory from 30 years ago. And you already know that, right? Everybody has had that experience and you might have been surprised by it. God, that reminds me of my grandma. And now you're thinking about your grandma and that's so cool. And you want to go back and you want to take another smell of it because you want to hang on to a little bit of grandma. It works the same way with painful experiences. Let me see what we got here. Okay, these are more symptoms. I don't know why I got these out of order. Huh?
It says you've been on for 2 hours, is that right?
I don't know. What time is it?
7 something?
We did.
15?
We started. That's about when we started. We're right at an hour. Okay, but thanks for mentioning that. Okay, so I'm gonna cut it. I don't want to go more than about an hour. But look at these things. Let me see what's the most important slide we can leave on. Well, the solution page. Okay, so here's what you want to do. Start getting honest about what's really happening in your present situation and what has happened in your life. You got to move your focus from looking at situations to looking at your perspectives. the way you've perceived your experiences, when when you felt disappointed, when something didn't work out for you, how did you interpret that? When you really, really, really wanted something to happen and it didn't, or maybe it was delayed, how did you feel in that moment? Well, I was sad. No, no, no. Keep going. No, what did you think about yourself? What did that mean about you? Because Bobby, he got it when he was supposed to get it. Why didn't you get it when you were supposed to get it? And we start concluding that it must be because there's something wrong with me. Start experiencing those things. You don't need to do anything with them. Just identify them. Allow yourself to feel that. Get honest with yourself about what's really happening. And remember that they're lies. That's the thing, is because we thought they were truth back then. When something didn't work out or we felt disappointed, and I thought, man, the reason I feel disappointed is because this thing didn't work out the way I wanted it. And I thought that meant it was because nobody loved me. Nobody cared that whether I could have that thing or not, which means I must not be lovable, right? Play the tape all the way through. And when you get to that point where you recognize that you felt less than, you felt not good enough, you felt unlovable, you felt like you didn't belong, you need to interject reality. What's the truth? The truth is nothing about who you are changed. Nothing about your value as a human changed. Nobody stopped loving you. Nobody was out to get you. Nobody did anything special to trip you up. All that happened was you had an actual life experience you didn't know how to respond to. So you decided in your mind what you thought was happening so you could make sense of it, and you've been stuck with it ever since. And we build on that, and then we build on that, and then we build on that. That's why we can be so suspicious. We think people are out to get us. We always think someone's trying to pull the rug over our eyes. Someone's always trying to get me. That's where that comes from. So we need to learn how to draw boundaries with other people. Oftentimes our experiences, our traumatic impact experiences, do involve other people in a relationship. And maybe there's some legitimacy to that. Maybe some other people have hurt us in certain ways. This is the time where we give them their stuff back. Okay, this thing that I've been carrying, that belongs to them. And this thing I've been carrying, that belongs to them. And this belongs to them. What's left? Me and how I think, perceive, and how I'm feeling. Focus on that. Be willing to talk about it, right? And be willing to talk about your pain with right people. That's a big one. You know, we stress that all the time. You know who your people are. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a very realistic way, because what can happen, especially with family members, whatever that dynamic looks like, that's what it is. And if you've got some serious emotional things that you want to talk about, know who you can go to that has the capacity to respond to you in the way you need it. And I'll just give you an example from my life. Something that I had to learn was when I had serious emotional things that I needed to talk about, I couldn't take that to my mom. I wasn't trying to withhold anything from her. I just learned in my journey that she comes from a different place. She comes from a different perspective. So I might take something to her and she didn't know how to give it its value. Say, Mom, I'm thinking about this thing. I'm really excited about it. Or I'm really hurt about it. And my mom, being the protector that she is and wanting to solve a problem as quickly as possible, would usually respond with, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not that big a deal. You need to move past that. And that's what we learn to do, just move past it. No, what we need to do now, if we're going to heal, is we need to move through it. So I learned to stop taking those kind of things to my mom, which incidentally changed our relationship because now I didn't need her to approve of me anymore. And you take it to people, that's why we need recovery circles. You take it to people who have the ability to listen and hear you and not judge you, not give you any advice, just allow you to speak it. Just speak it. And then ultimately, you've got to be willing to see your pain from a new perspective. And that's what I mean by at the very end of your little journey or your little process, interject reality. It's a lie. I wasn't unlovable. It doesn't matter how you feel. When you relive some of those things, you may revert to that emotional place where you feel less than, you feel no good, you feel shameful. So go there while reminding yourself it's a lie. It's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. Okay, thank you guys. I'm going to cut it for tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank you guys for coming. I don't know what the topic is next week, but subscribe to the channel. We're going to start going live a lot more often. You don't have to wait for Thursday night to get a topic. And we're also up for any requests. So if you're dealing with something very specific in your life, reach out to us and DM us or call us. You want a phone call? 405-248-2124. We've got online programs. We can work with whatever situation you're dealing with. Or if you want us to cover a topic in group, I will absolutely do that. Just reach out to us and let us know what's going on. Thank you guys. Justin's Lighthouse Recovery. And thank you, Tina, my engineer and wife and administrator. We're still getting our technical stuff down. You just hit, are you already off?
No.
You just hit the X.